Welcome, foolish mortals, to Halloween treats, presented by the Look Back Machine. For the entire month of October, we bring you 31 episodes on 31 flicks. So sit back and relax on your broomstick. We have blood-curdling boogeyman and sadistic serial killers. From castles to were-rabbits to spine-chilling spine-tinglers. Oh, but that's not all. It's only a bit. There's also Dahmer, Dracula, and Wallace and Gromit. So turn down the lights and turn up the sound. And ready your heart, for it's about to pound. Because there's Halloween film history abound. Happy Halloween from the Look Back Machine. "1931's Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi, is a pinnacle of the horror genre, and it was a spectacle at the time as well. The Boston Globe reported the RKO Keith Theater built the world's largest spiderweb to advertise the film at an astounding 18 feet in diameter. This film, along with Frankenstein, made Carl Laemmle's Universal a world-renowned horror factory. Universal went on to release 3 other Dracula films: Dracula's Daughter in 1936, Son of Dracula in 1943, and House of Dracula in 1945. Then in 1948, they decided to parody their own creation and brought back Lugosi for Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. After that, the Dracula franchise lay dormant at Universal until 1979. 2 years before '79, Dracula was thriving once again on Broadway, as it had with Lugosi, but this time the man in the cape was actor Frank Langella. The Washington Post declared it the most romantic play in town, which once again shows Langella's appeal, because the sets were Edward Gorey sketches blown up. Think Tim Burton drawings mixed with Shel Silverstein. Walter Mirisch, prolific producer of The Magnificent Seven and Some Like It Hot, saw Langella and decided it was time to bring the Universal monster back to the silver screen. For director, they went out to one of the men who helped define the popular vision of the 70s, director of Saturday Night Fever, John Badham. Badham did away with the Edward Gorey sketch sets from the Broadway play and stayed true to the Gothic look of the past, but he did add a disco light laser sex scene. After all, it was the 70s, and having sex with a vampire should always be presented in orgiastic flares. Director, John Badham.
I went to New York and I looked at it there, and I'm pretty sure I thought, well, the style that they're doing it in New York on stage is very campy, and using the drawings of Edward Gorey as scenery. And I don't know if you're familiar with Edward Gorey, but he does these wonderful Addams Family like gruesome black and white pen and ink drawings that are funny at the same time that they're kind of gruesome. And their scenery, this giant living room that the whole play takes place in, the walls are covered with books. Well, they're just kind of painted flats with books painted on them in black and white pen and ink. And the whole tone of the production was kind of campy. So I said, well, I don't think we can do that in a film for the whole thing. But what we do have is we have this amazingly attractive Frank Langella, and a lot of the success of this particular production is because he's this very good looking, very sexy guy, and a wonderful actor too. So the choice then that I made was to go to England and look for sites that were very beautiful, very romantic, and make kind of a romantic Gothic piece out of it rather than a campy piece. So the first thing I did when getting involved was said, let's go back to the very original Bram Stoker novel, and let's look at that. Let's start from scratch. Let's not make a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a mimeograph. Let's go back to the novel and approach it freshly and see what we get. And so Rick Richter, W.D. Richter, who did the adaptation, and I worked on it, but he did all the heavy lifting, and did a new adaptation that took advantage of lots of things that are only in the book that don't ever appear in the original play. And the Dracula Lugosi film is basically the Hamilton and Dean play just transferred to film. I stayed as far away as I could get. I mean, I'd seen it as, probably as a teenager, but I know from good experience that doing something like that will just poison your mind, because suddenly all you can see is the way they did it, and you need to get in there and get your own concept going, because otherwise you're doing like that remake of Psycho that was a few years ago. It was shot for shot the same. Somehow, what happened to the heart?
He has walked through centuries, untouched by time. Throughout eternity, no man has ever provoked such terrible fear and such haunting desire. Dracula, starring Frank Langella.
There's even shots in there that he suggested where he said, watch my hands in this shot when I'm hypnotizing Mina, and his hand would be down beside his hip, just in a normal position. You might not ordinarily pay for it, but it was doing something very sinuous and snake-like, his hand down there. So there are cuts to his hand in that particular sequence early on that is just kind of wonderfully creepy. I'm just also remembering when the ship that is carrying him crashes on the rocks and washes up on shore. They find him in a cave, and his hand kind of comes out from under his cape and grasps hold of Count Dracula's arm. And oh, geez, it's like, whoa. Well, I was just always watching for things that he was doing physically. He had one nervous tic that bothered him a lot, and I think in moments of stress, if you looked at his eyes, the eyes would kind of vibrate, like right, left, really quickly. And when I noticed him, I said, "Wow, that's really strange, Frank." And he said, "Oh, I can control it. Just let me know if you see it happening, because I know how to control it." And I go, "Okay, all right, great." But often when I would see it, particularly in the big showdown scene with Olivier character toward the end, when we got into close-up on Frank, you could see those eyes vibrating, and I did not say a word to have him control it, because it's just too spooky for words. It's in the film. That strange kind of gesture, and that said so much more in film than what he was doing when he was on stage, which would be these huge crosses where he would cross the Olivier character, Dr. Van Helsing, would hold up some garlic, and Frank would literally fly across the stage, not on wires, of course, he just somehow did, and crash into the wall. Well, that was just too big and didn't work on film. It just looked kind of silly. So we said, okay, let's not do that. But what we came up with is, instead of the biggest thing, was like the smallest thing, which is these vibrating pupils. He did want a very special kind of cape, and he did want a very special kind of wig that he wanted to wear. It turned out the English hairdressers didn't need the wig and were insulted. and managed to do his own hair perfectly, so there was never a wig. But he just kind of laid down the law on the marketing. The marketing guys were gonna come out with a Dracula doll that had Langella's face on the cover, and he absolutely kiboshed that. Said, no, I won't sign a marketing deal. Do you want your face on the doll box, John? No, okay. I got it.
Dracula.
As for the sex scene,
And I had some experience with learning about laser beam technology in films. We looked at it as a possibility in Saturday Night Fever, but at that point, the only machinery for laser beams were confined in these laboratories in New York, in these great huge boxes, and they did cool stuff, but there was like no way that we could transport it to our disco. And we said, okay, all right, well, forget that. But here we borrowed the laser beam devices that the Who were using in their concerts. We got to use it over a weekend, and just thought it would be a really interesting, cool way of getting this link up between Langella and Count Elegance character, Lucy. A lot of people really liked it and thought it was very sexy. A lot of people complained bitterly and said they didn't have laser beams in Dracula's time. And I said, well, guys, they didn't have cameras either, or 35 millimeter film. There's a lot of things they didn't have, and plus we're talking about vampires. Let's get a little perspective here. So, for some people it was a huge stylistic bump. It didn't do the business that they were hoping, because of partly at least because of a serious either a miscalculation or they just kind of missed something, and that was George Hamilton did a movie called Love at First Bite, which came out not 6 weeks before our Dracula, and it was a pretty nice little hit. And 6 weeks later, out comes this more serious version. I got the feeling people said, "Well, I had my Dracula movie. I don't need a second one for this summer." There we were releasing it in the summer instead of it probably around Halloween, which would have been better. In that sense, it was a disappointment and an irritating one, compounded by the fact that Universal Television never talked to Universal Features, so they decided to put a Dracula TV series on the air at the same time. God, which I found out by accident as I came back from England, and the driver that picked me up from the airport said, "Oh yeah, I've been working on Dracula." I said, "I don't remember you in England." No. Here we're doing it with so and so, and oh geez, well, thanks a lot.
Then it's Dracula 79. The Prince of Darkness has returned to cast his spell upon the unwary. But the evil Count will never rest in peace, for Kurt and Mary have sworn to end his immortal reign. Can goodness triumph, or will Dracula rule the day? Watch Tuesday on NBC. They don't call them cliffhangers for nothing.
Though commercially it was not a big hit. In the science fiction and fantasy and horror world, it was huge. I mean, we won grand prizes from at least 3 science fiction fantasy organizations, 2 in the United States and 1 grand prize in Paris. And I think I've gotten more prizes and awards from that movie than anything I've ever done. People who were into that stuff really loved it, and I still get occasional letters from people, and somebody said to me not last year, "God, thank you so much for that movie. I really got laid that night." It seemed to be the romantic and erotic part of it seemed to really click for a lot of people. I said, well, you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to Halloween Treats, presented by the Lookback Machine. Stay tuned for the entire month of October for an episode every single day till November.
The way we finally figured out to do it, with the help of Gil Taylor, who is the cinematographer, who is really good at camera tricks. I mean, he just was very ingenious. And I said, how can we pull back and not zoom back from Jan Francis in bed and come through the doors and then look up and see him? And Gil's suggestion was, well, what you have to do is you have to dolly with the doors, which means that you took the doors off their hinges and you put them on a rolling platform where they stood up, and you dollied doors and dolly and camera all right up to Jan Francis. And the camera is pressed against the glass of the doors. You with me? And so they, on cue, they start to pull the dolly back with the camera on it and the doors at the same time, all moving as one, until the point where the doors fit into the jamb of the frame, the door framing, and the camera can keep going and start tilting up. Now at this point, when you looked up from that set, what you would see was the ceiling of the soundstage. So as it starts tilting up, it goes through a little tiny bit of black, and right there we dissolve to another shot which had the vertical wall of the castle and Frank coming down the wall. Only it was not vertical; it was horizontal, and Frank was on wires being pulled along. So when you looked at it from one end of this particular horizontal set, the illusion was quite clear that he was coming down the wall instead of flying along a horizontal wall. Much easier to show you a diagram, but